Western civilization owes an immeasurable debt to the intellectual and cultural achievements of ancient Greece. The story begins not in Greece itself, but on the island of Crete. Here, the Minoan civilization flourished, a Bronze Age culture of immense sophistication. They built vast palace complexes, most notably the labyrinthine palace of Knossos. Minoan art was distinctive, characterized by fluid, naturalistic forms and vibrant frescoes. On the mainland, the Mycenaeans rose to power, a more militaristic and hierarchical society. Mycenaean warriors were famed for their bronze armor and boar's tusk helmets. They built heavily fortified citadels, like Mycenae and Tiryns, reflecting a need for defense. This was the era of heroes and legends, the backdrop for Homer's epic poems. Around 1200 BCE, this world collapsed, leading to a period known as the Greek Dark Ages. Writing, specifically the linear B script of the Mycenaeans, was lost for a time. Life reverted to smaller, isolated farming communities. Yet, it was in this period that ironworking was introduced, a crucial technological advance. The tradition of oral poetry, however, kept the myths and legends alive. The end of the Dark Ages heralded the dawn of the Archaic period. This era saw the emergence of the polis, or city-state, which would define Greek political life. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes became major powers. The Greeks adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet by introducing literacy. This period also saw a great wave of colonization across the Mediterranean. The Olympic Games were established in 776 BCE, fostering a sense of shared Greek identity. Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were finally written down. The development of the hoplite phalanx revolutionized warfare. Tyrants, or strongman rulers, often seized power in the city-states during this time. In Athens, the lawgiver Solon laid the groundwork for democracy with his reforms. He canceled debts and created a more equitable system of justice. This was followed by the reforms of Cleisthenes, who was often called the father of Athenian democracy. The classical period began with a monumental struggle, the Persian Wars. The vastly outnumbered Athenians won a decisive victory at Marathon. A decade later, the Persian king Xerxes launched a massive invasion of Greece. A small force of Spartans and their allies made a heroic last stand at Thermopylae. The Athenian navy, meanwhile, crushed the Persian fleet at the Battle of Salamis. The final victory at Plataea secured Greek independence. This victory ushered in the golden age of Athens. Under the leadership of the statesman Pericles, democracy flourished. This was the era of great artistic and architectural achievements. The Parthenon, a temple to the goddess Athena, was built on the Acropolis. Its sculptures, overseen by the master artist Phidias, represented the pinnacle of classical art. Greek theater was born, with tragedies by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Aeschylus introduced the concept of a second actor, revolutionizing drama. Sophocles' Oedipus Rex is a masterpiece of dramatic irony and fate. Euripides explored complex psychological themes and challenged traditional values. Comedies by Aristophanes satirized politics and society with biting wit. Philosophy, the love of wisdom, became a formal discipline. Socrates, the iconic gadfly of Athens, questioned everything. He believed the unexamined life was not worth living. His method of questioning, the Socratic method, is still used today. Socrates was ultimately sentenced to death for corrupting the youth. His student, Plato, would become one of the most influential thinkers in history. Plato founded the Academy in Athens, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. His Republic explored the ideal state and the nature of justice. Plato's theory of forms proposed a realm of perfect, eternal ideas. Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, took a more empirical approach. He studied and wrote on a vast range of subjects, from biology to politics. Aristotle's system of logic, based on the syllogism, dominated Western thought for centuries. He also founded his own school, the Lyceum, in Athens. The historian Herodotus is known as the father of history. He chronicled the Persian Wars, blending fact with storytelling. Thucydides, however, wrote a more scientific and impartial history of the Peloponnesian War. This war was a devastating conflict between Athens and Sparta and their respective allies. Sparta was a militaristic society, where life revolved around the state and the army. Athens, a naval power, relied on its empire and democratic ideals. The long war ultimately ended in Athenian defeat and the decline of its power. In the north, the kingdom of Macedon was rising under King Philip II. He reformed the Macedonian army, creating a highly effective fighting force. Philip conquered the Greek city-states, uniting them under his rule. His dream was to lead a united Greek army against the Persian Empire. However, he was assassinated before he could realize this ambition. His son, Alexander, would inherit his father's army and his dream. At the age of 20, Alexander the Great began one of the greatest military campaigns in history. He swiftly conquered the Persian Empire, from Egypt to India. His conquest spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across a vast area. This fusion of cultures marked the beginning of the Hellenistic period. Cities like Alexandria in Egypt became new centers of learning and innovation. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was built during this time. Hellenistic science made remarkable advances. Euclid compiled his Elements, the foundation of geometry for centuries. Archimedes of Syracuse was a brilliant mathematician, physicist, and inventor. He famously shouted "Eureka!" after discovering the principle of displacement in his bath. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth with remarkable accuracy. Hellenistic art became more dramatic, emotional, and realistic. The statue of the Winged Victory of Samothraces is a masterpiece of this era. Alexander's empire, however, fragmented into several kingdoms after his early death. These Hellenistic kingdoms constantly vied for power and influence. Meanwhile, a new power was rising in the West, Rome. The Romans deeply admired and assimilated Greek culture. The Roman poet Horace famously wrote, "Captive Greece took its fierce conqueror captive." By 146 BCE, Greece had been absorbed into the Roman Republic. Despite the military conquest, Greek influence only grew stronger. The Greek language became the lingua franca of the Eastern Mediterranean. Roman emperors like Hadrian were passionate Philhellenes, lovers of Greek culture. The legacy of Greek democracy shaped the political thought of the Roman Republic. Greek philosophy was studied and adapted by Roman thinkers like Cicero and Seneca. The architectural principles of Greek temples, with their columns and pediments, were adopted by the Romans. The Romans copied Greek sculptures on a massive scale. The New Testament of the Bible was written in Koine Greek. This ensured that Greek ideas were woven into the fabric of Christianity. Hippocratic Oath, a foundational text for medical ethics, originated in ancient Greece. Greek physicians like Galen made discoveries that dominated medicine for over 1,000 years. The concept of atom, from the Greek atomos meaning uncuttable, was first proposed by Democritus. Pythagoras and his followers believed that the universe was governed by mathematics. Their work laid the foundation for mathematics as a formal science. The idea of trial by a jury of one's peers is a direct inheritance from Athens. The word politics itself comes from the Greek policies. The marathon race commemorates the run of the soldier Phidippides. Greek mythology, with its pantheon of gods and heroes, continues to inspire art and literature. The tales of Hercules, Achilles, and Odysseus are known the world over. Muses, goddesses of the arts and sciences, represent the Greek passion for creativity. The concept of the hero, a mortal who achieves greatness through struggle, is a powerful Greek theme. The Greeks were the first to systematically study the natural world. They sought rational explanations for phenomena, moving away from purely mythological accounts. The word philosophy itself embodies this love of knowledge. Their debates on ethics, governance, and the meaning of life continue to resonate. The Socratic ideal of intellectual humility remains profoundly relevant. Plato's allegory of the cave is a timeless metaphor for education and enlightenment. Aristotle's emphasis on observation and classification is a cornerstone of the scientific method. The architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, are still used in buildings today. Countless government buildings and monuments worldwide borrow from Greek design. The very ideal of physical perfection and athletic competition is a Greek legacy. The Olympic flame is a modern tradition that honors this ancient heritage. The Greek language has given thousands of words to English and other languages. Words like democracy, philosophy, theater, and history are all Greek. The Greeks' exploration of humanism placed humanity at the center of the universe. Their art celebrated the beauty and potential of the human form. The balance between the individual and the community was a central theme in their politics. They wrestled with the tension between freedom and order. The concept of tragedy teaches us about human suffering and resilience. Comedy provides a vehicle for social critique and laughter. The Greeks were not perfect. Their society was built on slavery and excluded women from public life. Their city-states were almost constantly at war with one another. Yet their flaws do not diminish the brilliance of their contributions. They ask the fundamental questions that continue to shape our world. What is justice? What is a good life? What is the nature of reality? From science to politics, from art to philosophy, the echoes of ancient Greece are everywhere. Their legacy is not a ruin, but a living foundation of Western thought. To study the Greeks is to understand the origins of our own civilization. The Minoan civilization mysteriously declined around 1450 BCE. The eruption of the Thera volcano is a leading theory for their collapse. The Mycenaeans adopted the Minoan writing system, adapting it into Linear B. The legendary Trojan War, if it happened, would have occurred during the Mycenaean era. The rediscovery of Troy by Heinrich Schliemann confirmed its historical basis. The Greek alphabet was revolutionary because it included vowels. This made literacy far more accessible to a wider population. Early Greek sculpture was stiff and formal, influenced by Egyptian art. Over time, sculpture evolved to become incredibly naturalistic and lifelike. The invention of democracy in Athens was a radical experiment. Any male citizen could speak at the assembly and vote on laws. Public officials were often chosen by lot, a process called sortition. This was believed to be the purest form of democratic selection. The Golden Age was funded by the treasury of the Delian League. This league, initially a defensive alliance against Persia, effectively became an Athenian empire. The Peloponnesian War was sparked by Spartan fear of Athens' growing power. A devastating plague struck Athens early in the war, killing Pericles. Sicilian expedition was a catastrophic military disaster for Athens. Alexander the Great was tutored in his youth by Aristotle. Alexander famously solved the Gordian knot by cutting it with his sword. He named over 70 cities after himself, and one after his horse, Bucephalus. The spread of Greek culture is known as Hellenization. The final absorption of the Hellenistic kingdoms by Rome was a gradual process. The legacy of Greece, carried by Rome, became the bedrock of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Thus, the inquiries of men who lived over 2 millennia ago continue to fuel our modern quest for knowledge.